Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to speak on, I think, this very important subject, one that I know, while the school is not, necessarily responsible for regulating, does play a very big role in school, basically the school's organization and interaction with the students and also the enforcement of rules and laws within these walls. So, as many of you may recall, July 1st, edible products containing THC became legal in the state of Minnesota. It left a lot of cities sort of wondering exactly how this is to be enforced, given the amount of time leading up to when it was adopted and when it was allowed to become legal. So through a lot of hard work with the staff, we've done a lot of research, worked with League of Cities, talked to other communities to find out what they're doing, so as to not reinvent the wheel and create at least some level of consistency in the area and within the state. And I would say that going into this, our main goal was, how do we keep this product out of the hands of those that are under the age of 21? We know that it's very vital in alcohol and tobacco products. Same goes with THC products. So we wanted to make sure that is accomplished as our main priority, as our first goal with any changes. Then we were left with the questions of how do we make those changes. We felt that by amending our tobacco ordinance and calling it tobacco and edible products and then treating it similar to tobacco products would be the best method for us moving forward. The reason why we did not tie it to alcohol is because alcohol has basically a series of different regulations, and then also within alcohol license, there are situations where they could not even sell these products to begin with. Unlike the majority of those that sell tobacco products will also easily be able to sell these particular products. Convenience stores, tobacco stores, things of that, places of that nature. So what we did is we took and we added edible cannabinoid products to the ordinance, which you can see on the first page. And then a couple of things I just wanted to point out with the ordinance change is that on page 3, we are creating a term called licensed product. There we go. And basically that just collectively refers to any tobacco, nicotine product, or edible product. So at that point, now that we're regulating this, we're just saying these particular licensed products need to be regulated through some sort of permanent process, licensing process. But we still keep edible products separate from tobacco. There's two separate permits. There's one for edible products and one for tobacco products. So it's not one all-inclusive that you get one, you get the other. You do have to apply for them separately. I think a couple other items worthy of note is, I've already covered that. I think on page 7, again, we state that it's not our intention to ban the sale, but it's our intention to regulate this as allowed under state law. And again, our intention is to make sure that people under the age of 21 do not get their hands on it. I think some of the areas where we differ from the state requirements, you can see on page 9, section 12.406, subsections 2 through 4. Here we stiffen up our requirements and regulations quite a bit more than the state, where we make it illegal to be in possession, to hand to, or to use if you're under the age of 21. I do not believe that the state had passed such regulations, just a matter of it first being sold to, but not possession, use, or handed over to. So that is something that we have done to stiffen this up to, again, try to ensure that those that are under the age of 21 are not getting their hands, and in particular for the school district, those that would be coming into class at 8 a.m. are not having just eaten some of these products, we would hope. So, or at lunchtime or after school parking lot, whatever it may be. So we want to, we really had that in mind, and we wanted to bring this to the school board's attention about our effort to try and help regulate this issue. Secondly, under other illegal activities, sections 6 and 7, we're going to continue to work with those that do sell this product or have an interest in selling the product to make sure that we come up with something that makes sense to, again, make sure that those who are under the age of 21 do not buy the product or that it's not mistaken for other particular products. As you can see from some of the pictures that you have received, you know, some of these edible products don't look any different than just a regular candy. Besides the $20 price tag, you may not even be able to tell the difference between that and a regular bag of cookies or candy. So these are the kind of things that we are, again, hoping that with this regulation we'll be forcing that these items are separated from the non-cannabinoid products and clearly labeled as such, so that way they do not get mixed up. And then for licensees, we have increased the severity of the fines from $75 in violation to $300, and for second offense from $200 to $600, and then also increased the amount of time in which the offenses can build from 24 months to 36 months. And also that their licenses may be suspended or revoked if they do not follow this ordinance. So we're also stiffening up the penalties for those that would potentially violate this rule. So I think in the end what it comes down to, we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work in educating the distributors, educating the public on what these products are, and then adding this to our series of compliance checks moving forward to make sure that our businesses are following the rules. So I would be happy to take any questions now or at a later date if anyone on the board wishes to reach out to myself, the city clerk, or the mayor. We can certainly try to answer your questions if you have any later.
How do you regulate the vending machines? Is there a swipe in there for a driver's license or something that will determine if they're 21 years of age or not?
Vending machines, once this ordinance is passed, vending machines will no longer be allowed to dispense it, if I'm remembering what I have read correctly. Just like with cigarettes, this will be treated the same. It cannot be dispensed through any other means other than a actual person checking.
Will you have a process for compliance checks then? Probably more educational at first, educating the convenience stores and then second piece with that, we're getting a lot more younger individuals that are working in convenience stores and gas stations that might not be 21. Are they allowed to still sell, or do you have to be 21 in order to sell at the store?
To my knowledge, if they're allowed to sell tobacco products as allowed by state law, then they would also be allowed to sell these products. Again, that's one of the reasons why we tied this to the tobacco products, is that we also knew that people under the age of 21 do work at a lot of these convenience stores that are probably going to be one of the main distributors in addition to stores that specialize in CBD oils and cannabinoid products.
I just want to make a comment that the City of Albert Lea and Freeborn County have been proactive in leading the state in these measures for the protection of our young people in our community. You know, starting with the social host with alcohol and then to tobacco 21. And, you know, there are a few reasons why this has happened. One is that the brain is still developing during those years, and the ingestion of chemicals can alter brain development. Also, people who are under age 21 might be more likely to pass the substances on to younger people. And also, students can attend high school in Minnesota until age 21. And so adding these products to this ordinance does make sense to me personally. Are you looking for consensus at some point or just information?
I think feedback is the biggest thing that we're looking for right now. This is going to be a part, well, let's just face it, drug abuse is just a part of of school life is something that you have to deal with. And us working with the school district to make sure that we can still continue to find ways to prevent it, reduce it, and educate on it, I think are some key goals for us. I think we share that in common. But right now, if the school board wanted to say, yes, we approve these actions and wanted to make that motion, we'd certainly appreciate it. But I think the key thing, though, that we're looking for is just any kind of feedback. If you have anything to say that's like, we think this could seriously create a problem, or we don't quite understand this, we would really like to hear that.
Sure. When the Tobacco 21 passed, we heard about people just going into another community and coming back, but you've talked about that, passing it on and having possession of it. So it feels like that. Do you feel like that has helped with the Tobacco 21 piece of not like having people go to other communities that are close to buy their tobacco products, and then, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I started in November of 2020, and by then the federal laws had already kicked in, so I really wasn't here for that difference. At that point, it kind of became moot. However, I think with this in particular, what we're looking at here, by having possession and use, or even distributing to somebody under the age as a potential violation of this ordinance, we do have measures in place then at that point to do some enforcement. When I believe if we had followed what the state had simply passed, while they could not buy it from someplace that would sell it, they could then have somebody else buy it, have it in their car, have the package open, eating it, using it, and be under the age of 21. And I know that they will eventually come back and revisit the law, probably to make some of those corrections. But in the meantime, our ordinance will sort of plug that dam.
Has this passed then with the city, or is it coming up for your vote now? Is this in place now?
We are hoping to have first reading September 26th, and then the second Monday of October, hopefully final passage. We are going to have an informative session at our work session next meeting on the 12th of September, and go from there. And again, we're continuing to try to get input from the distributors, from a variety of organizations that deal with public health, children's health, the school district, everyone else too.
Thanks for taking the lead on this.
You're welcome. I would have to say that our city clerk did a great deal of the work, though. So
I would also like to state the obvious, that we're in the same team here, and you mentioned that drug abuse, alcohol, tobacco are certainly items that are of long-standing concern in our buildings, and I can speak of that personally because I was in the high school for many years, and it was an issue. And now it seems like as time goes on, the issues get more and more complicated. And 20 years ago, nobody had heard of, well, we'd heard of marijuana, obviously, but nothing that you could eat like a gummy, And it just gets more and more complicated. And we are definitely on the same team. And I don't know as if you need any emotion or any motion from this body. We have policies that are certainly similar to yours. Ron, you might want to speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I also want to just echo the sentiment of the board and just say, we appreciate the partnership, and it will be it will take us to continue to support our youth, and it is something that's aligned to our goals as we look to continue for that safe learning environment for our students and staff, and this is essential. And there's some unfortunate data out there that's pointing in directions that are challenging and also scary to see. But I think the more that we can be proactive and work collaboratively together, the stronger we'll be for our youth. So I appreciate this. Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
I also appreciate this. It makes sense to me. I'm just wondering what happens, and maybe it says in here too, but to the person under 21 who has eaten or has THC in their possession? What is the penalty for that?
Well, other individuals who sells, gives, or otherwise furnishes can receive a penalty of up to $50. And I believe that would also be for ingestion. That is a very good question. We will have to double check to make sure that that is also clearly stated in here. So again, this is in part why we want other people's inputs, because we can try and think of everything, but every now and then you might miss something, so I appreciate that.
It would appear to me that most of the emphasis here is on those that are responsible for presenting these materials to people of the ages that we're talking about. Yeah, it's a good question. That occurred to me too. What do we do with a high school student or a junior high school or middle school student that has possession, isn't using them? What are the consequences? From the district's point of view, I think I know what the consequences would be. It'd be the same as any other illicit drug or activity. I don't know what the statute.
I will have to double check it, whether or not this would just be a simple ordinance violation and it would fall under that particular category, or whether or not this would be held separately. Yeah. So I know that in general there are potential penalties for just violating the ordinance, so I'd have to double check that. So that's a very good question.
I would assume that the consequences would be a little bit more obvious and well outlined in a school setting than outside of the school setting. Ron?
Yeah, and I think also it would be, if flags for a student, hopefully for some early intervention, some opportunities to intervene at an early stage for some of our youth, so it doesn't become a gateway to something else. So I think it gets them supports, those external supports that our youth may be needing at that time or in future times. So I think it's mostly there's the consequences per se, but there's also the supports we need to think about also. So it flags the student for our internal supports, but maybe external supports as well.
Okay. Well, thank you all for having me.
I always forget if the red light is on, or why don't they make it green and red? Just an idea. All right. So thank you for letting us spend a few minutes with you guys. You know, one of our goals is providing a safe environment for our students and staff, both physically and emotionally. And one of the things that Ron has really earmarked that we are spending a significant amount of time on is looking at our buildings and our processes and what we have in place to provide that very welcoming but also secure entrances at our schools. And right now, the school that stands out as having almost a perfect setup is Halverson. You walk in, or you get in, you have to go into the main office where you are welcomed by Christy, the secretary, and then she buzzes you into the main building. That's really, you know, considered the gold standard of secure and welcoming schools. So as we're starting to look across our other schools, we decided that we would really start with the high school. It's where our greatest number of students is located and the greatest number of staff in any one building. So Steve and Ron and I went over one day, kind of looked at what could be done, and Steve has got an option that we would like for you to consider.
So this is kind of my rude drawing here. If you look at, this is the front entrance to the school, the Tiger door. Okay, you've got classrooms to the right there. Yeah, that's the doors going in right there. And the Tiger would be inside up above that. So I kind of color coded, we're looking at putting a solid wall where the yellow line is, just to make the vestibule smaller, just to control the people coming in and we want to put a person there where the blue is. That's going to be a desk to have a person there. And then the line, it's kind of an orange line right there. Yep, that's another wall. You'll have a doorway to go in there, so we'll have a person behind a desk there. Not sure exactly what it'll look like, maybe plexiglass, but welcoming, to be able to welcome somebody in. That door's already locked to get into the school, but to get entrance into the school, then it would have to be unlocked. We aren't going to go all the way to the ceiling, just because we need, there is no cooling in that vestibule. We do have heat in that vestibule, but no cooling. So we're looking at putting a mini split in there. That's just where the pink is outside. So we'll have control of the temperature, cooling and heating. There's heating in there now, and we won't go all the way to the top, so we'll be able to keep the heat going across the vestibule. Currently, you've probably all been there, but I'll explain. If you're walking in that door right now, where it says reception up there, that's where in the office they have cameras or video that they can see if somebody that comes in, they buzz, and they can talk to the person right in that vestibule to try to get access to the school. They can buzz the person in. So they can talk to them, what are you here for, thank you for coming, whatever it might be, and they could let them in, but we have no control of that person from the vestibule into the office where the reception is. With putting somebody right out there in that vestibule, then we have control of, if we don't want to let them in, we don't have to let them in. And you can take a look at them and speak to them face to face. It'd be a lot more personal too. It's tough to control just looking at a screen and talking to a person, and all you see is their face. Any questions on that?
I like the idea of having somebody up there, because if you go to the school at the right time and all the kids are leaving, it's pretty easy to walk in without getting seen or check at the office. I think this just adds that extra layer of security, especially during some of those peak times. Other times it's probably going to be quiet enough, but again, just for safety purposes, it seems like a good option.
Right. Is there someone at the commons door early morning when the kids come to school? Do we have staff watching that door?
Yeah, we have staff at that door and at the, I guess it's called the pool door,
Pool door, right.
where the buses come in. So, yeah, we have staff at both of those doors. We have staff just out there greeting students. We have staff that are assigned to be there. So there are definitely staff at the entrances where students come in the mornings.
We don't lock the doors until after school starts, but there's staff
Right.
seeing people coming in, yeah.
The tentative plan is that one of the hall monitors, so a current staff person, would be at that desk. They would have, we would have available some sort of technology there. They would be able to do other work as assigned, but we are not proposing that there would be additional staff to man those.
So that would be a supervision responsibility?
It would be a hall monitor, not a teacher supervision. Yeah. No, not a teacher supervision.
I have a couple questions. So the yellow and the orange are just two straight walls there, and then the person's on the right. So they're already in the building. So there's really nothing stopping them from continuing into the building.
They would have to be buzzed into the
Those
main.
doors
So there are doors there. Okay.
Yeah, the second set of doors are locked.
So this person is between the two
Correct.
sets. Okay.
Right.
So then the stairs are going the other way. Okay. I
Yeah,
see.
that's you have to get inside to go those stairs. That comes up and goes around the Tiger
Mm-hmm.
to go to the gym.
Okay.
It'd be similar to the Sibley entry. They can be inside that vestibule, but then they have to stand there until they can get buzzed in.
Right, but
Right.
there would be someone right there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it is a little hard to tell. Can, those are the outside doors,
Those are the outside doors.
This would be the.
Those,
the inside
inside
doors.
doors.
Don't these classrooms go this way?
Yep.
So this is, that's not right then?
No, that's correct.
Oh, this is the edge of the building.
Right,
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So, we're talking about creating an area here, a new area.
Correct.
correct.
And, these are the existing doors, which currently are locked, so now this door will be locked?
They are all locked right now. The
Oh, yeah.
inside
I
doors.
know.
Yeah. All of these doors are locked right now, currently. And when we put this in, these are gonna be locked, and all we'll do is we'll just have this one unlocked.
So that's the new, that's the addition to the current structure.
You get in, there's no addition, that's the way it is, and the door's all locked.
Yes,
No, it's fine, and this is there right now.
Okay.
It's about a 12 by 10 room. It's all there, we don't have to add on. All we're adding is these two walls to keep the people contained in there and keep this person safe and keep it cool. And this door already is activated right now by the office to let people in through this door. But once this is in place, this person here will buzz that person in, but otherwise it's locked, they can't get in.
And will that, then that door, once the wall's up, will that be an exit door coming out to your left there? That we're
This?
there? Yeah. Are you gonna get?
Fire code, you can get out any door all the time.
Oh,
Yeah, there's no stopping that.
but it'll be in, I mean,
But getting in, you can't get in.
right.
But you can always get out on all the doors. There's 4 doors. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the outside of the vestibule and the inside of the vestibule.
I'll have to take a keen look at that.
We could take a field trip.
The Tiger is right here.
Should have drawn that, Steve.
Yeah, this is all, yeah.
So if I,
It really lends
Yeah.
itself very well to a relatively simple, not a lot of having to build any structures. We're talking about 2 6-foot walls, one of them's a partial wall, or we'll have a header, and then probably a plexiglass or something. And then with the, what is it called, a splitter? Mini split. And then that will help us regulate the temperature in there for that person.
It'll add its own switch.
I would guess the plexiglass is a little bit more than, right?
Right.
Okay, when you
Yeah.
say plexiglass.
It's like entering a ticket booth maybe or something like that. We haven't finalized that, but something on that idea.
so if I could add, and then in one piece, and I appreciate, and thank you for the work on this, is as we think about and using the word contain and having families and guests and caregivers come in, it's also important to lead with a welcoming. So they actually encounter a person, they welcome it into the building, which reinforces our goals. It builds that community, talk to them, be able to direct them where they need to go. So you're actually interfacing with an adult before entering the building. Now, it's just a screen, what's your name, and then we know the office gets busy. So this is just a layer of additional welcoming and building that culture and those relationships, but also security. And as we continue to build this out, that is that focus, that welcoming and safe opportunity for our guests, our family, and our caregivers to come into our buildings. So I appreciate that.
You know, as we mentioned, this is really just the first of most of our buildings that we need to look at on how we can create something similar in all of our buildings. Frankly, some are going to be a little easier than others to provide this same welcoming and secure entrance. But that'll be our work now over the next few months, is looking at each of our buildings. You might have noticed here at Brookside, we've started that process here with our new welcome area at door B. We're gonna start getting that door unlocked. We've hired a success coach that is going to be the welcome person there and help our families know where to navigate. This building is somewhat difficult to navigate. So we're making a start, but we know that time is going to have to, we're going to have some time to plan for all of our buildings. And B, we're going to need resources to put toward getting these buildings to where we all feel like we've provided the most welcoming and secure opportunity. So that leads us into our next discussion. And so I'd like, yes.
One other question for Steve. And I probably know the answer to this, and this gets into quite a few more dollars. But we do have all the doors in the school locked all the time, correct? Well,
Almost.
okay, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is there a sensor system that would cost a lot of money that a big red light goes off if a door is propped open on the cafeteria side? And like I said,
There are some doors that are,
okay,
and some that are not.
that's always been my biggest concern, because we've seen that at other
Right.
facilities
Right.
across the country. Something's propped open. It's not even have to be by accident, it's by your tension. It might be, I'm running out to my car.
Yeah. There's
And-
some of the fire doors, they all have sensors on them, but there are some doors that are not. Like going into that commons area, it is not. The pool door is actually open all the time, but it's always staffed. There's always a person at that pool door. But I would say probably 80–90% of them do have a sensor on them. If it gets opened at all, an alarm goes off.
And there's logistics to that. But if you're spending some money, I'm just making a suggestion to maybe come back and say there's 9 doors that aren't covered right now at X number of dollars a door. I'd be happy to spend the money for the kids, teachers, and everyone else. So just a thought.
And in building this reception desk area here, I would also like us to keep the welcoming, but do whatever we can for security and safety of that person too, because the person will already be there right in front of them. So whether that means they're raised or whatever needs to happen so that someone can't come in and hurt a person, push a button and let themselves in. It's just a prime time to address it now.
Right.
And I know this has been on discussion off and on throughout the years, but a metal detector, has that ever been in the conversation? Is it, I know that would be another expense. Is that something to be considered or not necessary at this point?
I'll let Ron address that one.
Not at this time. We haven't had that discussion yet. I do know that I've been in buildings, outstate that do, and then the flow of students. And then what that does, it actually agitates even more when you have a constricted flow and then multiple entry points. So it is challenging. So I think if you can do some proactive, some mitigation strategies, and then we can talk what are some additional layers. Adult presence, active supervision, definitely preventative strategies in the morning and dismissal. I was there tonight looking at dismissal this afternoon at the high school and having staff in multiple spaces and continue to reflect with building leadership how to strengthen that. Those are the opportunities we're looking at now.
Just to piggyback on Jill's too, is there any retrofit to our thermal scanners?
I don't know.
No.
Not unless there's a higher temperature to what you're looking for, because that's all they're built for.
Right. Make sure they all have a fever.
Right.
Just a quick question kind of related to what Jill touched on. Let's say that greeter's in there and it's a worst case scenario. Somebody's mad, they're locked out, they're trying to get in, they're attacking the plexiglass. I mean, how secure will that be? Will the greeter be able to run inside the building quickly and get away? How would that work?
Not really.
Okay.
What they would have to do, they'll have a phone, and, I mean,
We could even potentially put a panic button there.
it's possible of doing a panic button too, yep. Yep, either way,
That
where
e-
they hit a panic button and we could have lights go off in the office, you know, the police officers, the principal's office, stuff like that, to recognize that they're having a problem. All our schools, if you just pick up the phone and hit 88 and you're in the PA system, you can lock the place down from any room, any phone. So they could do it that way or notify people that way.
And Director Hoffman, currently, if a person, it's hard to even tell if a person's elevated when looking on that little square now or that intercom. So this at least gives an assessment that a person can do and alert via the radio. And again, another proactive strategy to get a heightened alert versus buzzing someone in now, and if they're elevated, they go straight up the stairs and disappear. So just another layer.
And does this person enter this area through that, and through the vestibule or whatever, between the two doors? Is that how that person gets in and out?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no other doorway.
And will the reception area still have the ability to have the buzzing in and out, the buzzing in system?
Yes.
They won't lose that?
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Yeah, in case, you know, there's a
Yeah.
break or something. That,
And we'd
yeah.
just keep what we have also in the office for backup. If that person needs to step out or something, whatever it might be, yep.
And I'm assuming these have handicap opening doors, these, okay, thank you.
Okay, then I'd like to have Jeff Seeley and Aaron Bushberger from Ellers is going to come and talk about a very timely opportunity for us to secure funding for this project and our other building projects and other safety measures that we might, as a school district, deem would be advantageous for us. So Jeff and Aaron.
Hi there, thank you for having us. I'm Aaron and this is Jeff. And before you have a document what's known as a pre-sale report. So we're going to speak a little bit about the opportunity that Jen had mentioned, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about what that process actually looks like. And so on the first page of the pre-sale report, we have on the top there is the proposed issue. And so what we're referring to is $1,010,000 in potential school building bonds. And this is a result of your May 2018 election, where the voters approved up to $24,615,000 in bonds. And so you can see there, Series 2018A and 2018B, the district issued $23,603,975 in bonds, leaving a remaining unused authority of $1,011,025. And so you can see the proposed issue is just a little bit less than the remaining unused authority, and that's because school district bonds like these are issued in $5,000 increments, so that's why you'll see that $1,010,000. Towards the bottom of the page under the term call feature, you can see we would propose issuing, these are pretty short bonds, typically they're in the 20-year range, but this would just be for a little over 5 years. With payments made from 2024 through 2028. And then at the bottom there, we do mention a term called bank qualification. And so if a district issues less than $10 million over the course of a year, we can issue bank qualified bonds, which typically leads to a little bit lower interest rate as well. On the top of the next page, a little bit more about the bond issuance process. So you can see there that there's a state credit enhancement program, and what this means is the state guarantees your principal and interest payments, and this is available to all Minnesota school districts for certain types of debt under this issue would qualify. The next area is the rating there, and so if you participate in the state credit enhancement program, you do receive a credit enhancement rating. which currently for the state is a AA1. So that's the second highest rating you can have under a AAA. So that means when investors are looking to purchase your bonds, they see that state credit enhancement rating, which typically leads to a little bit lower interest rate as well. And then at the bottom of that page is the method of sale, and so just mentioning that we would go through a competitive process where interested underwriters would all bid at the same time, and then we would award that bid to the lowest overall interest cost. I am going to actually skip to if you go 2 pages here. So the proposed debt issuance schedule. So we're here tonight to talk about the potential bonds. And if you decide to move forward, then at your September 26th meeting, you would approve a resolution authorizing the sale of those bonds. And then over the course of the next couple weeks, we would work with Jen in gathering some information for potential investors. And then you can see there on October 24th, we would take bids for the bonds and then come to the school board meeting that night to award the sale of the bonds. And then it takes a few weeks to process, and then on November 17th, you would actually receive those proceeds to be able to use for your potential projects. The next page is what's known as a sources and uses document, and so this shows the sources of the funds and how you would use those. So you can see the par amount there of just over $1 million. We are estimating a small premium that underwriters do offer for these bids. And then the uses of funds, so the underwriter's discount, that's the fee that the underwriter takes. There are legal and fiscal costs associated with this. And then you can see net available for your project costs would be just over $970,000 for your potential projects. The next page is just the principal and interest, projected principal and interest schedule at this time. So you can see that if we were to move forward, we would actually update that based on the results, and Jen would use that then for your property tax levy going forward. The next page is our schedule of our existing debt. There's a lot of information here, but on the left-hand side is your current property tax base, and we estimate changes in that going forward. The next section is your existing debt commitments, and so we factor that in when we're scheduling when we're scheduling your debt moving forward. The next section is the proposed new school building bonds. As I mentioned, that's projected to be 5 years at this point. And then at the far right-hand side is your overall debt and your overall tax rate. And so I think this is actually better shown on the last page here, which is the chart, our graph. And so you can see in the gray is your projected tax rate based on all of the information in that previous sheet that we just went through. So the gray is your existing debt. You can see the blue there for the 5 years is the potential debt that you would issue. And as we do when we're structuring debt, we like that nice consistent tax rate. And so you can see that'll level that tax rate over the course of the next 5 years. And then after that, you'll have some drop downs going forward with that. So that's a little bit about kind of what we're looking at and the bond process that we would use if you decide to move forward. So we can answer any questions you might have about that.
So you want to talk about the tax impact? This illustrates it, but maybe mention that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as you can see, it's all about the tax rate, right? Because you're making level debt payments, regardless if your property values increase or decreasing, you're still making that scheduled debt service payment. And so there would be, with this, there would be no tax impact then to your property taxpayers. So
from 2022 to
correct.
2023.
Yes.
Yeah, we call this a tax neutral schedule, which basically looks at the prior year and brings you can see the little drop in the gray, brings the payment back up to that, but not over it. So we won't be projecting a tax increase from the prior year.
You said callable in 5 years or total life of 5 years?
Total life.
total life. Yep, they would not be callable. No.
Is this something we can get a copy of before we?
Absolutely, yeah, we can send this out. So, when Jeff and Aaron brought this to my attention, obviously one of the questions was, well, why didn't we issue the full amount back in 2018? So I did email Lori. She didn't have an exact memory, but she said what her memory is that as bids came in, it became evident that the entire amount would not be needed for the projects that had been identified. And so at that point, the district made the decision not to issue the full amount as approved by the voters. It's a relatively recent legislation that now allows districts to go back for up to 5 years. So this puts a little bit of a time sensitivity to this because we are at that 5-year mark in May. If we don't proceed now, we lose this opportunity of that dip in 2023, because if we sell them now, it'll go on the levy that we'll be looking at here in a few weeks. And so we can take advantage of that dip. What I will tell you with that dip is that, we love when we can look at our levy and say, oh, it's going down from 2020, 22 to 23. But we already know that it's going to go back up again. So even though there's a 1 year where we have a dip, then we're going to have to come back the next year, and it looks like there's a big increase. Now, does this dip, are we showing this because of the large excess?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to explain this, but you guys can jump in. So when we issued bonds a while back, every year the state looks at our debt service fund. Every year we levy 105% of our next year's bond interest and principal payments. And over time, that 5% grows. We also had an instance where we had capitalized some interest payments, and that was sitting in our debt service. So we had a large debt service fund balance because of this capitalized interest. Well, now we've spent that, we've paid that capitalized interest, but now we're left with a pretty significant debt service fund balance. And we know that the state has a formula, which, and I will send this to you also, has a formula to determine that, okay, you're going to get a negative adjustment on your levy because we need to get your debt service fund down. You can't carry this large debt service fund balance. So what happens is, and what we're projecting is that we are going to get about a $450,000 negative adjustment on the pay 2023 levy. Even though our property tax ask is going to be about the same as it's been the last couple of years, we're suddenly going to have this large negative adjustment. And then what happens is the next year that negative adjustment goes away. They've made the correction, and so now to the public it looks like we've got a large property tax increase. When in fact just our base property tax remains pretty much level, but we have this large negative adjustment now that happens. Now what we're proposing is that we backfill that with this opportunity that really helps us address an identified need in the district, which is providing as safe buildings for our students and staff as we possibly can. And we know that there's going to be a cost to that. And the cost that we really don't have any other sources of funds to address.
Has anybody put together an estimate of the cost to do the remaining schools?
We have
I
not.
know there's $970,000 available. You think that'll cover it, Steve? Hawthorne's gonna be expensive.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it obviously depends.
Should go a long way.
Right.
Yeah, I think it'll go
Right.
a long ways, and, and it's such a unique opportunity for us. And it almost, it was just as Ron started making this discussion about, where are we on literally a few days earlier, Jeff and Aaron had contacted me with this opportunity, and it was just like, boy, this is just a perfect marriage of having an opportunity that our taxpayers from one year to the next will not see an increase, and yet it will provide us funds to really fulfill our district goals, or one of that goal that talks about a safe and welcoming environment for our students and staff and community members.
Well, I guess I'm a bit torn with this
Right.
because, so basically, the community approved $25 million for the athletic field and Halverson School gym. So we ended up not spending that amount. So really, their taxes would go down now. So we're basically saying we want to levy that extra amount that you have said we could spend on these other things and spend them on security, which to me, the community would be in support of, but we haven't really given them that opportunity to say yes or no, and that's why we need to represent them. But so that's basically what we're saying, that we did not spend the $25 million, and so now we want to spend that extra amount on security. And I guess my outlook on that would be if they are really meaningful changes that really would make our buildings secure, I think our community would support that. But, you know, if we secure an entrance and then somebody can go out through and break a window and enter that way, I don't, you know, how meaningful is that change? I don't know. And sounds like we don't really have a plan. We just know we could spend the money in the area.
You're right, we have not gone to all of the other buildings and created an exact plan. We do know that this particular opportunity is time sensitive. We do know that there's going to be a cost to these other projects. And the cost to, especially I think when we look at the middle school and Sibley, the cost is going to be greater than it's going to be at the high school, just because those entrances look quite different. There's not like that the situation that we have at the high school. You know, we also have, you know, I oftentimes have principals talking about additional cameras, be it in the playgrounds, be it indoors. You know, those are also things that we could address. These panic buttons, we've talked about putting panic buttons with our secretaries, that could be addressed. We are looking at potentially getting larger monitors so that for the schools, until we get a different entrance, that the secretaries have a larger view of what is, you know, who's asking entrance into the building. So I absolutely think that we could, there's an opportunity in school funding. We can assign or commit funds for specific purposes. We could consider assigning or committing these funds solely for the purpose of safety and security for our schools. And then that way we would know that that would be where those funds would be spent. And I think that would be something very reasonable, because I don't have any doubt that we have needs that would cost this $970,000.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, just to kind of that short-term and long-term. And as you do that return on investment, this is really being creative with integrity and planful. So any type of investment should outlive all of us. So that investment should be built around what are our true values. And you're right, there's the windows and those hypotheticals. But if our focus is creating a welcoming and safe, as we then will look at the high school, and then how do we replicate that, but know that each building's unique, and be creative in our plan, and be thoughtful in our plan. Again, what is the most fiscally responsible way to vision that out? And those are the conversations we've had with the buildings as well.
So Jennifer, would there be a proposed amount in the 2023 pay where you would potentially then drop our school district taxes, but then have to raise it in 24, 25, 26, and 27. Well, I guess they would get back to that 15 million, or whatever that mark is. But so would there be an initial drop, and then we'd have to raise it?
This at all.
Okay,
There would be that drop to the gray area because of this large negative adjustment that we're anticipating. So we know it's coming. We'll have it in black and white in 2 days. And then, because that negative adjustment will disappear, the next year, we're gonna get back close to the level. I've lived through this once in a previous district, and it's very uncomfortable because you guys know school finance is really complicated. And to try to explain to people, well, no, the base levy's really not changing, but yeah, it's going up by $400,000. People tend to forget when there's a decrease.
they always forget the decrease, yep.
But the next year, when it gets back to kind of the normal level, suddenly it looks like we really raised our levy. Well, we really haven't raised our levy, we just aren't recognizing a large negative adjustment. And my concern is that if we don't take advantage of this opportunity, we will do what we can with what we have, but we just don't have funds available unless we shift our priorities, which we can do, but that's always at a cost of something else. Those would be the kind of discussions then that we would need to have if we wanted to prioritize the buildings and look at where we would find those funds from other places. That's really where we would be.
Is there any possibility, I know it's a tight window, that we could get a big picture budget? I think the community is gonna feel more comfortable knowing some specifics on what we're trying to do. If we just say security, it's pretty wide open yet. And I know it's such a time crunch, but if we could get a little detail into that, I think that would be easier, and then we could communicate that out as we look at it. It'd make it easier, I think, as a board to make that decision.
I'm just wondering to what level of detail, if we're saying really right now, our initial is to get welcoming and secure entrances at all of the schools. And that is, and we have defined that as people are coming into our schools, they are having a conversation with the person, and that person then lets them into the building. And then, as opposed to most of our buildings now, someone, and in some of our buildings, not even in line of sight of a person coming into the building are getting buzzed in, and then, even though they're told to come to the office, we know that that would not be necessary. So I think our messaging right now would be, we're using this money to create welcoming and secure entrances at all of our schools.
And I guess I'm thinking is, can you give them some ideas of, on the cameras, if we're constructing some walls, we know there's gonna be costs involved there. There's gonna be the screens, the welcoming desk, so you've got a lot of those pieces, but if they can just get a broad picture that it's just not being thrown out there, but there's specific thought process in mind for it.
I guess I would just like to know specifically then do you want drawings? Do you want, I'm not sure what.
Personally, I was just thinking if you could assign some dollar values to each school and what, general picture, what's gonna happen at Sibley. We know that's gonna be an expensive site. Southwest, the middle school, we know that's gonna be an expensive site. We can put the high school in there. We probably have a pretty close idea on the cost just because we have some things in place already. We know Halverson is good. Hawthorne, again, an older building. What kind of things do we need to look at there? But, it can be general, but it helps kind of direct a little bit.
And I absolutely hear what you're saying. My hesitation is then when we say we think Halverson's going to cost this much, we think this middle school is going to cost this much, and then if we have surprises or the thought we had in our head next week doesn't really work out that it's feasible, then we've kind of gone out on a limb, I think, with estimated costs per building. I really do recognize the hesitancy. And I think, and again, one of the things that we can do as a board is we can, by board action, the strongest commitment is by board action to commit funds for a specific purpose. So we can do an assignment of funds, it's not quite as formal. We can do a commitment of funds, and that they can be solely used for the purposes of school safety and security.
And Jennifer, can it be for improvements to that? Not just maintenance of what we have, but can we say improvements to safety and security?
Oh, absolutely, yes, and I think that's really what it would be.
I think-
To improve the safety and security of our schools.
I think, that verbiage plus just saying a little bit of what you just said to us right now about some possibilities, even each school needs to be assessed for what it needs, but some of the possibilities generally are X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely.
And
This would be our intent. This is how we would define a welcoming and secure school. It would have to look like this, and we can certainly come up with that definition of what that would look like at each, or what that would mean in each school.
And I think tied to that is two things. What a position for our district to be in, to have these conversations instead of other districts are having the conversation we need to do these security measures for our students' safety, and they don't have this opportunity. So I think that's something we can't forget, because these are conversations that other districts are having, and they're trying to decide that tough decision on shifting what our intent is. The second thing is, I think just by the fact that we were very good stewards of the first levy passing and didn't spend all that money, I think we have a track record of making good fiscal decisions. So I think for me, I think this is a good opportunity, and I would definitely support this. And it's up to us to make sure that communication happens on to the public about the dip, and then why you're paying that way. I think that's what we're charged with.
And I think
the continued updates on as we go through projects, so well aware of everything that's going on. The other thought I had too is, do we have to worry about any security updates at Hammer Field with the facility and then also on the grounds? Because I'm guessing as we delve into it, we would see more and more.
Well, I think we will be really evaluating all of our sites, including Hammer, on what we can do within the resources that we'll have, and to really address the needs that we identify.
And I think it's important to keep our buildings equally treated, and some buildings will require more funding than others, because of what we talked about.
Just because of the way the current layout is.
What is the deadline for using these proposed funds? Is it March of? I know, okay, for securing them under this plan.
To take advantage of this opportunity, we would have to sell really we're about at the deadline in our proposed, because it would have to get on the levy, which is November.
Yep. And one of the things this plan does is you get $1 million towards accomplishing a significant portion of your upgrades, whether it's 2 or 3 sites or 4 sites, whatever you need. If you dedicate funds on an annual basis, a lot of times that's funds left over, and it might take you a few years to build up sufficient funds to address this. So this gets you going on a project much sooner than if you're going to take leftover dollars and bank them, if you will, for that purpose. And it is tax neutral, which is why it worked out really nice, as Jen said.
Okay, we're planning to take action on it.
No, the plan is that we would take action on the 26th. So this was just really presenting this, giving you guys opportunity to ask questions. I know Ashley has got this, so she will send this out to all of you. If you have questions, for sure, contact me. If I don't know the answers, got their phone numbers. It's important to us that, that you, the board, completely understands our opportunity here and what our plan is for the use of the funds. And so whatever we can do to help you have the information you need to make the decision.
All right, I don't think there's any question as to whether or not the board has a consensus that security and a welcoming environment are very important issues. We live in a world that's different than it used to be, and these requirements weren't necessary a few years back. They are now. We have an opportunity to avail ourselves of funds that could be used for this purpose. So, as Kim pointed out, I think we're in a happy circumstance in that we have those funds potentially available. Others do not. Another thought that occurs to me regarding all of this, especially in concerns with security, I'm a little reluctant to be all completely transparent. It's like letting the enemy know where your troops are. I've always been pretty much a fan of allowing people who are very intelligent about providing for security to do their thing and then not make a whole lot of public proclamation about it. That just makes me a little nervous. It makes me nervous to even speak about these things in public because it might give somebody an idea that they wouldn't have had before. So I hear Dennis's concern about being specific, but I don't think we want to get too specific.
No, I don't think into the detail as much, but more big picture.
Yeah.
So they get an idea, and as you go along, there might be things that come up at a school that we weren't even expecting.
Well, exactly, and that's why I hate to put even potential dollar amounts behind schools. Yeah, honestly, we're not that far in the process. This all came about, in fairly quick order. Jeff and Aaron contacted me. Ron came on board shortly thereafter. This was a high priority for him, and we started looking at some things. I was like, boy, this just lined up. We couldn't have asked for a better situation to allow us to have these funds. As Jeff said, kind of in a lump sum. So once we've identified the projects and we've come to decisions, we're ready to make it happen.
And I'm totally supportive of the safety and security. I'm trying to look at it as from a community member outside looking in. What are they going to think if they don't get good information? If they only hear bits and pieces or through the rumor mill, that could
And that's it's our story to tell.
Yes.
And we have to be good tellers of our story. And that, so that's on all of us to make sure that the information is out there completely and accurately as to, we want to be very transparent about what our priorities are and how we are going to align our resources to those priorities.
If I had to think of a subject that the community would be in favor of spending this money for, I can't think of any other subject that would be more important than this to the community.
Just a quick question. Can this money be used for perhaps hiring another security officer, or does it have to be for building improvements?
It cannot be used to hire people.
Okay.
So in the original bonds, in the original wording of the bonds, it's for the betterment of...
Acquisition and betterment of school facilities.
Acquisition and betterment of school facilities. So no, it cannot be used for things like hiring a security person.
Okay.
All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. Today is a very broad overview on the MCA data from the spring of '22. Buildings haven't even dug in yet to analyze, so again, this is just a district overview. And so we'll just go through. If you read the paper, I know Alex did an article on kind of an overview, and so you're going to hear some of the same things, but we'll kind of talk through a few of the district things that are notable. So the parent results, parent and guardian will be receiving this week and next week in the mail individual student results. So parents haven't even received their student information yet. But we get that from MDE, and it goes out in a mailing. We're getting it ready right now. And so parents will soon be getting the individual results of their students' scores. And just a quick overview of what Alex and I talked about and what he wrote in the newspaper as well was, there were some successes that we saw increases in all grades 3 through 6 in reading, math, and science. Fourth grade reading, we have to look at some opportunities there. But to see increases from the prior year was good news. As we look more at grades 7 through 11, a little harder to give much info on the results yet because we really need to dig in and look at some things, inconsistencies, again, lower participation rates, which we've talked about before, prior years. And then the next steps with these results will be buildings will start digging in, and grade level team, content level teams, they'll triangulate the data with the other results we have besides the MCA scores, looking at fast screening results, access results, the phonemic and phonic awareness diagnostic reading assessments we give, as well as any other classroom assessments. So, teams will identify any gaps we're seeing in our Tier 1 instruction, which all students receive, and then digging in deeper of what are the supports, the instruction, the needs for Tiers 2 and 3. So with that, do you have the remote, Ashley? Okay. Again, these are quick overviews. We're not digging into demographics today, just the raw results we received. And so for third grade, we have reading and math here. And so again, we talked about, we saw increases both in reading and math in third grade from the prior year. The other piece of data that we'll look at, and just a reminder, we didn't have MCA assessments in 2020. So I did put 2019 on here because that was pre-COVID. So you could see what the pre-pandemic MCA scores were versus 2022 after. The other piece I added on this chart is you can see the statewide proficiency, so you can see where it's, as a result, the state average was, as well as the percent of assessed kids that took the test. And why don't we go to the fourth grade? Fourth grade was where obviously we'll dig in deeper, as well as when we look at the reading results, because there we saw, a drop of 11 percentage points in the reading MCA score. So that's really something that we have to ask a lot of questions, look into, we'll work with grade level teams and individual results to try and figure that one out. So again, I don't have any great depth answers for you on any of the results here. It's just an overview. Fifth grade, again, both increases in reading and math. Statewide, we're pretty comparable for reading. Math, we have some areas of growth, but those were the fifth grade scores. And then fifth grade science, very close to the state average, and increase from 21, but we look at the pre-COVID and below that. So those are just the broad overviews for elementary. Any questions on elementary that?
In 2019, then let's just say the fourth graders, the third graders, would that be 4 years? Or is that grade 19? And I'm just trying to look at how they did in eighth grade. If it's 5 years away, 4 years, just to compare it, what would they be back in 19? I mean, is that a 5-year deal, 6 years? Sometimes I get confused on the numbers.
What the cohort group is?
Well, yeah, so the third graders in 2019, does that mean then they're eighth graders now, probably, right? That's their seventh.
7.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to go back and forth. I know there's a lot of changes and maturity and everything between them,
Yeah.
but just see how
Right.
they're doing in math versus at that point in their education. Okay.
Yeah. And, yeah, thanks. And we do look at cohort groups too as we dig down into the data. We'll track them over their growth over the years. And so we don't have the cohort data analyzed either at this point, so. Correct. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a straight third grade score every single year, different kids. Sixth grade, an increase in reading, getting closer to the state average. Math, an increase of 10 percentage points. And again, still we have lots of opportunities for growth, but I think the positive message, just initially looking at these, is we did see growth from 2021 to 22, so.
Mary Jo, the statewide numbers, is that only public schools, or does that include private schools also?
Just public.
Okay.
Yeah, all Minnesota K-12 public schools.
And do we have their assessed percentages for the state?
We can. I didn't put that on here, but we can get that. Yep.
Then would that assessed number only be then of the public schools?
Yes.
Okay.
Non-publics, homeschool, not required to do statewide assessments. That's their choice. Then we head into 8th grade. And 8th grade has reading, math, and the following screen will have science. But, decreases in reading and just a slight increase in math. And then science, a slight decrease. And when you get to 10th grade, you can see the percent, assessed is really affecting us as a district. So 52% of the 10th graders took the reading test and 46% took the math test. And so those are conversations we have to have as a district, schools. Starts in middle school and then the high school. And then 11th grade, and I think we've talked about this before, that 11th grade math, we've talked that there's just a lot of opt-outs. You can see only 48% of the students took this assessment. That is the same year that the ACT is given. And so I know some families have made choices that they'll do the ACT and not the MCA.
How do you get a student with 2 years left in school be proficient in math or any elementary school? How do you do that?
How do you get them to be proficient? Yeah. Well, we try. Yeah, it's challenging. If they're, we have the grad requirements for math, and if they're not meeting the grad requirements, the math classes that they have to pass, we do credit recovery. There might be summer school, there might be after school. It's really more individualized support because we want students to pass and we want them to graduate. So, is it easy? No. But we do it. The assumption, but
can't make those assumptions without really knowing and digging into the data.
Yeah. And typically, as we've had buildings really dive in and start their data cycles and in analyzing the data and looking at all the factors, individual buildings have, Ron and I haven't had talked yet, but the individual buildings will come and talk through their results and their plans and work that they've done. So I don't know what this year will look like, because I don't want to assume anything, but I know Ron really likes having buildings having their voice and having a chance to talk through the work they're doing.
Well, that's almost a segue into the next slide, but, and we'll get to, so before I give some concluding remarks to this, I'll give the board some opportunity to ask further questions, then I'll transition us.
Again, I don't have a lot of detail for you tonight. This was just the overview. The data just came out the end of August. But we did want you to get the data, so it's in your hands.
So Mary Jo, you'll be sending us the state assessed percentage? Or
I will get
is there
that.
a way? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
So a perfect segue. So as we think about what was just presented, some great questions. You know, hope is not a strategy here. And if you plan and hope and you receive the summative at that time, great question, what do we do? So that is important, why we need to monitor the growth of each student. And that's the FAST Bridge, which is a formative assessment. So as we think about the screener that is taking place right now, it gives a data point for each student as they enter. And then our work is to really then look as if a student needs additional supports or extensions, and then through a data cycle, what strategies are we using to meet the needs of each student. That goes into goal number 3, which is strengthen professional learning communities and data cycles, which that we will have staff, principals come in and talk about those data cycles. Then in the winter, we'll do the FAST Bridge again, and we'll monitor growth of our students. What impact of those strategies having for the growth of the student as they progress towards the standards. Ultimately, our goal as a teacher, as a district, is to ensure the students reach and exceed the state benchmarks, which are the state standards. That is our goal set forth by the state. The summative at the end of, or in April, at that point, you can't hope that a student made it there. We should have information knowing that if the student's making adequate growth or needs further extensions. So that goes back to our multi-tiered systems of support, which is goal number 1. So we'll bring principals back to talk about their strategies in a study session to say, how do we know, what are we doing differently, and what impacts that? And then we will analyze our winter FAST Bridge to look at the growth. And at that point, the building leaders and their instructional leadership teams, the teachers, they need to look at their strategies to see what impact those strategies are having, and then do they need to modify or do they need to continue, and what students at that point have been identified for more extensions or more supports. So that is really the strength of the multi-tiered systems of support, the data cycles, which will bring leaders back to talk about the alignment to our goals. So during the study sessions, we should have discussions that are aligned to our values. How do we know we're moving through and supporting? It's not just words, that it's the actions that we're taking, the decisions we're taking that's aligned with our district goals and our values. So those will be the alignment of the study sessions. And my hope is today you heard the different from the fiscal responsibility all the way to the safe and secure and the welcoming and building that culture and that community. And now moving forward to saying, okay, this is where we were last year through what are we going to do now with the FAST Bridge and the summative, which reinforces our actual district mission for that academic growth. So I want to thank those who presented tonight.
You mentioned discussions with that. Those are the PLC groups that you bring in weekly, I believe.
Yes, the professional learning communities have those discussions to discuss their strategies, what strategies, and how do we know it's having an impact.
That's sort of the grassroots where all this
Correct.
begins.
And then that comes back up into their building leadership team where they can have further discussions aligned to their HRS, really that level 2 is having an impact, and what does that look like?
Not always are all those students included, but I think for the transparency of our district, we are including and checking everybody because we're wanting every single child to succeed. So just seeing how we're doing, it'd be interesting that 52% that aren't taking it, how they measure out in locally on those. I don't know how easy it is to do, but we probably have to do a lot of digging. But I think it'd be interesting to see the patterns there.
And I think to reinforce that, it's also important to know that this is an English-only test. And then our students that are having English acquisition, how are we supporting them, knowing it's about their growth and their accelerated growth to get them where not only the English acquisition, but how are we supporting the academic content as well. So it's really ensuring that support for each student to continue the growth for the greater good. But knowing that everyone's trajectory, their growth is going to look different because we need to support them in their entry point and then create a learning plan for each student as we accelerate their learning opportunity.
And the bullet point, second from the bottom, build community across the district while focusing on culture and climate, brings to mind for me building community also across our community. And I feel that there are supports actually in our community that we're not accessing as a district, whether it's a retired person who would come into one class a week for an hour, you know, to help tutor some students through. I think there are some community resources that the district can also capitalize on.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. And knowing that volunteerism is now something that we're opening the doors again. So it's been a couple years. So to get that and re-engage in those partnerships will be important. But we've kind of been on pause for a couple years due to COVID. So really looking and focusing on what's happening in the classroom and then provide those additional supports.